All right, guys, welcome back to Revive School. We're continuing on our study in the major prophets. You know, we've been looking at the life of Isaiah. We've been looking at the life of Jeremiah. We're going to get into Daniel and Ezekiel, and then actually even at the end of the week, we're going to study Lamentations, which many people would say was written by Jeremiah himself. And so a lot of this, look, I have to admit, when I went to Dallas Seminary in Gordon-Conwell, yes, they are schools that have no problem talking about the end times, but man, there's something about when you study it for yourself, like there's a whole new perspective. I mean, honestly, I have enjoyed the major prophets more than maybe any book so far. It's not because I don't enjoy the Gospels or I don't enjoy the Pentateuch. It just is kind of like, man, Revive School is about Matthew 5:17, about how Jesus truly comes in not to abolish, not to destroy, but to fulfill. That's what he's here. He's here to see the fulfillment of what we're reading. And the prophets, as funny as it sounds, they're prophesying that it's going to happen. And so it's like they're, you know, we call this the complete portrait of the Messiah. Revive School is a complete portrait of the Messiah, meaning where do you see Jesus, where do you see Yeshua, specifically in every single book of the Bible? And, you know, for us, we've taken time to literally study this. And it has been so eye-opening, and the Holy Spirit has just been breathing life for me personally into this. And so when you look at, you know, these bigger pictures about judgment coming against Judah, or judgment coming against all of Israel, or judgment coming, you know, when we're going to get into all of the nations, it seems like, why on earth do I even care? And yet the reality is if you have this perspective that it's Jesus who's going to be a part of all of this, that when the nations are going to be judged, then Jesus is going to come back in the end, like it literally weaves together. You have the judgment, you have the deliverance, and the only thing I can keep saying, Kevin, it's like the puzzle is just keeps getting snapped together. You know, and all of a sudden it's like, oh man, I had that missing piece, but now I see this, now I get this. And so don't blow past major prophets because it's quote unquote in the Old Testament. Like it's all important. All of this is important, and I can't say it enough. The Word of God is alive and active. I know I don't typically just go off on a tangent with this, but I'm telling you guys, the major prophets are essential. These guys got a download and a revelation from the Lord that talks about, yes, even not only the first coming, his return, but then the end. And then he even gets into the millennium. And so that's what we're going to start getting into some of this today. Now think about this. Jeremiah, okay, Kevin, for 40 plus years, Jeremiah has been speaking a word specifically to his people. Think about this, okay? We've talked about Isaiah and what he's releasing and speaking in the Babylonian captivity. Then you got Jeremiah. Okay, he's speaking about the Babylonian captivity, and I think we've even had this discussion. He experiences part of it. You know, he experiences part of this. So his whole ministry is into the southern kingdom most of the time. But what you're going to see is in this it's really a transition coming into chapter 46 through chapter 51. Now it's like he has a message for the nations. It's like he transitions from I'm going to pour into my people, but now God just broadened my message. And it's kind of cool because, I don't know, sometimes it feels weird to me. I don't know how else to describe this, but I feel like Jeremiah is for his own people. But when you go to Jeremiah 1:5, it's pretty clear God's call on Jeremiah's life is more than just his nation. It's for his nations. I mean, look at the description of Jeremiah. Before I formed thee in the belly. Kevin, I see we're still on King James here. Let's try it again, thee and thou. So actually, I have no problem with King James. I just don't understand it. Thanks to Gordy. All right, here it is. Jeremiah 1:5. I chose you before I formed you in the womb. I set you apart before you were born. This is God talking about Jeremiah. I appointed you a prophet to the what? To the nations. Don't overlook little words. And so like, you know, Jeremiah for 40 plus years, you know what he probably thought? Man, why am I just stuck with these people? They're not listening. Oh, don't worry, the nations won't either. But that's who he's appointed to. He's a prophet to the nations. So I just want to say, give it time when God has a call in your life. Maybe somebody's released a prophetic word over you. Maybe there's a call in your life and you're like, why isn't this coming to fruition? Give it time. Jeremiah became a prophet to the nations. And in 46 through 51, you begin to see and hear these words. Here's what he's going to tell the nations from chapters 46 to 51. By the way, I'm handing you the cup. What that means is, Kevin, if you go to Jeremiah 25, verse 15. Jeremiah 25, verse 15, it has this imagery of this cup. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, said to me. Take this cup of the wine of wrath from my hand and make all the nations I am sending to you to drink from it. Kevin, Usually when you hear a cup of wine of wrath, you're probably not like, can I have some more, please? You know, you're not thinking, oh, this is really good seasoned aged wine. I like it. No. I'm going to make these guys drink it, and it's not going to be good. That's what we're going to enter into, you guys, in Jeremiah 46 through 51 chapters. It really is this picture of God's judgment. Now, I like what Nelson's commentary does. And, you know, when people hear Old Testament God, they're like, see, that's why I don't follow him. He's too harsh. He pours out his wrath. He does. He does. And in fact, he gives two reasons. And in fact, there's going to be judgment that's going to actually come upon 9 nations in 46 through 51. So again, prophet to the nations. He's switching his gear just for a second, okay, from Judah, the southern kingdom, to now 9 nations. And so here's what he's going to bring. He's going to bring about, one, he's going to say is that God's wrath was not without cause. I mean, granted, think about this, and I like what Nelson says. There's definite justification for God's wrath. The nations had turned away, I don't care how you look at it, from their Creator. They naturally just turned away from the Creator, and then they began to, as Gordy was even alluding to, you know, everybody began to have this incense of with their hands making of these false gods. And so they turned away from the Creator, and so it's like, it's interesting to me, well, there's no God that would, you know, pour out his wrath on people, but he was just in doing this. They clearly chose to turn away. They were guilty by turning away from the Creator. So I just want to say, as we hear about this wrath upon nations, you have to have understanding that this was not without cause. They brought it upon themselves. And then number 2, and there's really only 2, is that God's wrath, and see if you can kind of make the difference between the two. God's wrath was not without remedy. Any thoughts, Tom, when you hear that?
Oh, he always provides a way out. I mean, that's consistent even in the New Testament. Right. You will not be tempted beyond what you can bear. He always provides a way out. It's whether we take it or not.
That's right. And that's exactly what's happening with all of these nations. Over and over again, look, God's wrath was not without cause, and God's wrath was not without remedy. Nelson's commentary, I think, is pretty simple, and God clearly gives them out. Just repent. Repent and turn to him. But yet, what did they do? They refused God's gracious offer. I think that's a fair statement. And then I like what Nelson says. Now they have to face his wrath. And so we're going to get into this wrath of what they're going to face, but I kind of wanted just to set this up about how real this is. And so this is a real picture, okay? So in verse 1, I'm in Jeremiah 46:1. The word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, the prophet, about the nations. Here it is again, Kevin. So there's this reiteration. This is my call in life. I got to say this again, you guys. Please be patient with the call in your life. Just be patient and don't force it. Johanan, what did he do? He forced it. He was told to stay and wait in the land, and guess what happened? Because he forced God's hand, he died probably pretty early. Earlier than what was planned. He died with famine, the sword, all of these people, because why? They brought it on themselves. And so what you're going to begin to walk into in verses 2 through 28, the whole rest of the chapter, in Jeremiah 46, okay, is judgment against, and here's what we're going to just say, Egypt. How does this unfold? If we can, Kevin, I'm going to kind of walk through, and Tom, feel free to jump in anytime, Pastor Tom, in all of this. I want to give you a summary of the battle before I even go by verse, because I think the language gets confusing for me. Historically, they ties in battles, and honestly, it's not like I've ever studied Egyptian battles over my life, right? So I want to kind of just be very, very generic in all of this. So one is, you got to understand, Pharaoh Necho, okay? Pharaoh Necho was, Kevin, do you know what country he's tied to? Egypt. Okay, that's good. What always gives it away, please not making fun at all, is Pharaoh. Usually there's a language of, you just should think of,
what?
Walk like an Egyptian. And I always think of Pharaoh whenever I think of walk like. Do you know that song, Rich? I'll sing it, but I know it'll get cut out. But
no, please do.
Oh, no, that's okay. You don't need any more blooper reels, apparently. So anyway, okay, so about Egypt and the army of Pharaoh Necho. Pharaoh Necho, okay, he comes in. Okay, this is in let's just go there. Man, who knows where we'll end up today. 2 Chronicles 35, 20 through 27. Okay, 2 Chronicles 25, 20 through 27. This is the mindset. After all this, Josiah had prepared for the temple. Necho, there he is, king of Egypt, okay, Pharaoh, same guy, marched up to fight at Carchemish, by the Euphrates, and Josiah went out to confront him. Okay? Keep going if you can. But Necho sent messengers to him saying, what is this issue between you and me, king of Judah? I've not come against you today, but I'm fighting another dynasty. God told me to hurry. Stop opposing God who is with me. Don't make him destroy you. Keeps going. But Josiah did not turn away from him. Instead, in order to fight with him, he disguised himself. He did not listen to Necho's words, what? Came from the mouth of God, but went to the valley of Megiddo to fight. Okay? The archers shot King Josiah and said to his servants, take me away, for I am severely wounded. So his servants took him out of the war chariot, carried him into the second chariot, brought him to Jerusalem, then he died. And they buried him in the tomb of his fathers. All Judah and Jerusalem mourned for Josiah. So what do you have? Okay, first of all, Pharaoh Necho, king Egypt. Rich, that's for you.
Look, keep doing it. It's helpful for me if you keep doing it.
He defeats Judah, and King Josiah dies in this process. So what happens? Egypt begins to, what? Tom, how would you say that?
They're taking predominance.
Yeah, they're entering into kind of a new era. But now, here's what you have, okay, is that Nebuchadnezzar comes in. King Nebuchadnezzar, Kevin, where's he from?
Babylon.
Babylon, okay. Then here it comes, okay. Kevin has a great map. In 605, you have what's called the Battle of Carchemish. He comes into Carchemish, and what does he do? He ends up fighting Necho, the Egyptians. So you have, quote unquote, Babylonians, and you have Egyptians at Carchemish. Who wins, Tom?
The Babylonians.
The Babylonians do. This is during the 4th year, though, of Jehoiakim, okay, in this time period. Okay, kind of an interesting time period. Now, look, people have different eras and all this stuff. The point is this is roughly the thought of what they would say. At that point, the defeat broke the Egyptians. Carchemish literally brought Egyptians down where they were before up. And so now enter in the new supreme being, which would be Babylon. Okay, so Egypt comes in, Judah loses. King Josiah dies. Josiah? Did I say that right? Yeah. King Josiah dies in Megiddo. Interesting enough, it's in Megiddo. Then you have the Battle of Carchemish. The Egyptians are like, hey man, we're the top of the line. Well, the Babylonians come in, take care of the Egyptians. They fall. Now the Babylonians are literally the powerhouse, okay, of this whole region. Kevin, what do you got? Look, all I can just say is it's confusing because there's so many different battles, and you have 2nd Chronicles, you're tying them into this, and then you have a future tense. And so again, I want to say this, Egyptians were up on the top, okay? They defeated Judah. The Babylonians come in 605 BC, Battle of Carchemish, take care of that, and then what do you know? Now we have a new supreme being, now we have a powerhouse, quote unquote, with the Babylonians. Now let's jump into 46:2. Now you already know the story. Okay? Don't turn off the radio, don't turn off this, because now I want you to begin to understand really what this looks like. And let me just put it a different way. You're going to see Egypt's, and I like what Warren Wiersbe says. He calls it the shameful defeat, the shameful defeat. Okay? It's horrible. And so what you see in verse 2 is this, okay? About Egypt. Remember, that a word came to Jeremiah the prophet for the nations, okay? About Egypt and the army of Pharaoh Necho, Egypt's king, which was defeated at Carchemish on the Euphrates River. So the battle took place, interesting enough, by water, by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, in the 4th year of Judah's king Jehoiakim, son of Josiah. Okay, lots of going on here. But what's really interesting to me is King Jehoiakim, I know this is obvious, but Josiah got defeated by who? Necho. And so now all of a sudden, here you have family walking into a battle, and you're going to see defeat again. He says in verse 3, okay, Egyptians, here's what you're supposed to do. Deploy small shields and large, draw near for battle. It was kind of like, I like what Wiersbe says, the soldiers are getting ready. The soldiers are getting ready. And here's a cool picture for these small shields and large shields. Okay, so hang in here. Kevin, can you do me a favor? Go to 1 Kings 10, 16, and 17. This is an image of the small and the large shields. Like they legitimately, there's a call of like, okay, here we go. We're going to go get ready. Let's go do the battle. It says, King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 15 pounds of gold went into each shield. That's the large ones. Now, he says, made 300 small shields of hammered gold, about 4 pounds of gold. So, obviously, the larger one has more gold, the smaller ones, but it's clear that they use both of these for a battle. Okay, so this is the imagery that I want you to have. And in verse 4, harness on the horses. Okay, I'm back, Kevin, if you don't mind, back in Jeremiah 46. Mount the steeds, take your positions with helmets on, polish the lances, put on armor. Guys, I need you to get ready. Why have I seen this in verse 5? They are terrified. This is really interesting. They're retreating. Their warriors are crushed. They flee headlong. They never look back. Terrors on every side. Kevin, do you realize what we were just describing? And then what just happened? Like, it's kind of radical. Like, all of a sudden, these guys are ready to fight. And then what happens in verse 5?
They're running.
They're running away. So the Egyptians are coming in. Man, we got it. We got our shields, our large, our small, lots of gold. We got our horses. We got our helmets on. Lances are up and ready. And then it says, why have I seen this? They're retreating. They never look back. Terror is on every side. Literally, what you're seeing is a picture of Carchemish. You see the Babylonians coming in, and they're overpowering, quote unquote, the Egyptians. So fear is around, and there's this expression like, man, I don't know what to do. But we're talking about the Egyptians, you guys. He says in verse 6, the swift cannot flee, the warrior cannot escape. In the north by the bank of the Euphrates rivers, they stumble and fall. Who is this rising like the Nile, like rivers whose waters churn? Hang in here, I'm going to describe this. In verse 8 it says, Egypt rises like the Nile, and its waters churn like rivers. He boasts, I will go up, I'll cover the earth, I will destroy cities with their residents. In other words, they're so confident. You have to understand something, okay? They're so confident, like, how else would you say this? Like, we've got so many soldiers, we're going to overpower everybody. Like, this is the reality of a proud, prideful country. Right? This is what I'm going to go up, I got it all covered. And then in verse 9 it says this, rise up, you cavalry. Race furiously, you chariots. Let the warriors go forth, Cush and Put, who are ready or are able to handle shields, and the Ludum, who are able to handle and string the bow. Again, there's this image. All I want to say is that there's an image of the proud are ready to fight. God has, or not God, but the Egyptians are ready to go. Okay? Again, I understand we just heard this language. They're getting ready to flee, but now we're saying they're like, this is the image. But now when you read verse 10, okay, it's a shift. That day belongs to the Lord. The God of hosts, a day of vengeance to avenge himself against his adversaries. The sword will devour and be satisfied. It will drink its fill of their blood because it will be a sacrifice to the Lord, the God of hosts. And it continues on, in the northern land by the Euphrates River. I like what Warren Wiersbe says, God showed up and a holy war took place. And Egypt became the sacrifice. I mean, go back to verse 9 if you don't mind. Well, actually, verse 10, excuse me. Verse 10, the sword will devour and be satisfied. It will drink its fill of their blood because it will be a sacrifice to the Lord, the God of hosts. Why is God avenging himself on Egypt? Just take a wild guess. Tom, what do you got?
It's a buildup over generations, and it actually goes back probably even to the Israelites, the Hebrews, leaving in the time of Moses.
Can you go to Jeremiah 2, Kevin, for me? Jeremiah 2, verse 30 for me. Okay, Jeremiah 2, verse 30. It says, I have struck down your children in vain. They would not accept discipline. Your own sword has devoured your prophets like a ravaging lion. There's this imagery of the sword, right, that we have, that we're seeing unfold. Maybe the death of Josiah. Maybe the death of Josiah. Your own sword has devoured your prophets. I can't say that. I'm just saying, if in this process there was a form of death, maybe just throwing out different options. Because I want to give specifics in this, and I think one of them is, one, the slavery that they've always done. Two, there could be specifics. It could be in regards to Josiah. But the reality is, he gives them no outlet. Look what he says in verse 11. Go up to Gilead and get balm. Virgin daughter Egypt, you have multiplied remedies in vain. There is no healing for you. This is pure mockery, to be honest, okay? What you have in Gilead is at the east of Sea of Galilee. It was known for having an abundance of healing balm. So what does he say? He says, hey, by the way, why don't you go to Gilead and get all of the healing experiences and what you need. But then he says, by the way, you have multiplied remedies in vain. There's no healing. It's not going to happen. Kind of an interesting proposal. And then he says, hey, in verse 12, the nations have heard of your dishonor. Your outcry fills the earth because warrior stumbles against warrior, and together both of them have fallen. And now the wounds that you have brought upon yourself are so bad that you will not see healing. Judgment is coming, not only now to Judah, but now he's extending this to Egypt. So here you have, in the verses 3 through 12, the defeat of Egypt. That's pretty much what you just saw. Battle of Carchemish. You see this in 605. Babylonians come in. There's a new powerhouse. They're coming in. They're wiping out the Egyptians. And he just described the battle. Okay? Now, in this regards, it's kind of interesting because, Kevin, from what we know, it probably hasn't happened yet. By the time he's speaking this is prophetic. Would everybody agree?
So, in mine of like our chapters, we've jumped back in time a little bit.
Yeah, that's the whole thing that's driving me crazy about Jeremiah. All we're doing is building on this. This is it. We're just building off of the defeat that's coming for Egypt. But then he says, this is how it's going to happen. It's going to come through Babylon. Okay, so he actually begins to become specific. He says in verse 13, this is the word the Lord spoke to Jeremiah, the prophet, about the coming of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, to defeat the land of Egypt. So now he's talking about the invasion that's going to take place. He then prophesies Egypt's going to lose. He doesn't say to who yet in verses 3 through 12. Now he says, by the way, Babylonians are going to come in, and this is how it's going to happen. Okay? So he's very specific. It's kind of actually, it's pretty unbelievable, to be honest. Like only the Lord could do this. It's unbelievable how this thing unfolds. And let's go into this if we can. In verse 14, announce it in Egypt. Proclaim it in Migdol. Proclaim it in Memphis, not Tennessee, just so you guys know, and in Tahpanhes. Take positions. Prepare yourself, for the sword devours all around you. Why have your strong ones been swept away? Each one has not stood, for the Lord has thrust him down. I think this is cool because, just to make sure everybody understands, Babylon is just the instrument for God that he's using. It just happens to be that the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, and his army is the ones that he's doing. I just want to make sure everybody understands God is clearly in control. And then it continues on in verse 16. He continues to stumble. Indeed, each falls over the other. They say, get up, let's return to our people and to the land of our birth, away from the sword that oppresses. There they will cry out, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, was all noise. He was a loudmouth. You know what that means. He was a loudmouth. He was a big mouth. He was all noise. He let the opportune moment pass. In other words, this dude, Pharaoh, Necho, just all talk. It didn't happen. There they will cry out, man, are you kidding me? All of this, we got nothing. Babylon is coming in. The Pharaoh who said he could help us, he's not helping us at all. Then it continues on in verse 18 and on. It says, as I live, this is the king's declaration. Yahweh of hosts is his name. He will come like Tabor among the mountains and like Carmel by the sea. When you hear this, it's kind of a picture of Nebuchadnezzar, and I don't know how else to describe this. He says he will come like Tabor among the mountains and like Carmel. Nebuchadnezzar's presence, the Babylonians' presence, will literally cover the countryside. That's what we're emphasizing here. You will not be able to flee from this. As long as I live, this is actually going to take place. So he says in verse 19, get your bags ready for exile, inhabitants of daughter Egypt. For Memphis will become a desolation, uninhabited ruins. So just as far as, let's just talk about Memphis just for a little bit. Noph, N-O-P-H, okay, is Memphis, okay? That's another term. It's the great city of Egypt, and it is totally going to be prophesied that it will be finally destroyed and ruined. So now this isn't the Jerusalem. We're talking about an actual city in Egypt. It's going to be destroyed. Who's going to do this? King Babylon. Who's going to do this? King Nebuchadnezzar, yes, of the Babylonians. And here you thought all the Egyptians had everything that they needed. It's a really special picture, but it's not a really encouraging one. And in fact, Jeremiah releases beautiful pictures of Egypt, okay, and what's going to happen. Look at this in verse 20. Egypt is a beautiful young cow, but a horsefly from the north is coming against her. You know what that really means? I've got a fat calf, a fat heifer, and it's going to be slaughtered. And he's like, if you didn't figure that one out, let's keep going. Verse 21, even her mercenaries among her are like stall-fed calves. They too will turn back. Together they'll flee, for they will not take their stand. For the day of their calamity is coming on them, the time of their punishment. Again, he has this illustration of these fatted calves, and they're going to be killed. Egypt, he's talking about Egypt. In verse 22, Egypt is described as a slithering snake. Now look at this. It says, for the enemy will come with an army. Kevin, who's the army? Babylon. Babylon is coming as an army with axes, and look how they're described. They're going to come against her like those who cut trees. So now all of a sudden, Egypt is described like trees, and they're before woodcutters, and the woodcutters are going to come and literally chop down trees. I would even say probably even the snakes. All of the above. And then they're coming like, and I love this image, and it says, though it is dense, okay, they're going to cut down her forest, though it is dense, for they are more numerous than locusts, they cannot be counted. So the whole army that's coming against you is now this portrayal of army of locusts. The Babylonians are coming to clean house. And then in verse 24, it says, daughter Egypt will be put to shame, handed over to a northern people. Literally, you will see that they will lose. 25, the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel says, I am about to punish Ammon, god of Thebes, along with Pharaoh, Egypt, her gods and her kings, Pharaoh and those trusting in him. It says in verse 26, I will hand them over to those who want to take their lives, to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and his officers. But after this, it will be inhabited again as in ancient times. This is the Lord's declaration. Okay, don't miss this. You can't miss this one. I will hand them over to those who want to take their lives. So the Egyptians are going to be handed over to the Babylonians and his officers. But what does it say? After this, Egypt will be inhabited again as in ancient times. So punishment's coming, Kevin, but does he wipe out the Egyptians?
No.
He doesn't. So judgment is coming against Egypt. Yes, they're going to be destroyed by the Babylonians. We see this in the Battle of Carchemish. But in the big picture, when it's all said and done, some of them, Scripture even says, they will actually worship and know the Lord. 5 cities, even it says, will actually begin to speak the language of Canaan. They'll actually possibly even speak Hebrew in worshiping God. So when you hear Jeremiah's word, this message of wrath that's coming against Egypt, it's coming against Egypt. They have to turn to the Lord because they're not, apparently, and so destruction's coming, but yet he still gives them a glimmer of hope. And it goes back to, you guys, God's wrath was not without cause. They deserved this, but yet what does he do? God still gives them an out. He still gives them a quote-unquote remedy. Now, when you put all of this together, in 27 and 28, it's your final 2 verses of Jeremiah 46, he then switches his audience, and what does he do? He switches it back to his people. He says, but you, my servant Jacob, do not be afraid. Don't be discouraged, Israel, for without fail I will save you from far away and your descendants from the land of their captivity. Jacob will return and have calm and quiet with no one to frighten him. And you, my servant Jacob, do not be afraid. This is the Lord's declaration, for I will be with you. I will bring destruction on all the nations, including Egypt, where I have banished you, but I will not bring destruction on you. I will discipline you with justice, and I will by no means leave you unpunished. So look, everybody's going to have to deal with their consequences. That judgment is coming, but by the way, when I take care of the nations, and I'm pushing them away, I'm still going to preserve you. It's a great picture. And all said and done, Egypt or Israel or America, guess what? Every one of us has a chance to turn to him. The question is will you? All right, that's Jeremiah 46. We didn't get to 47, but hey, we'll continue on the studies with major prophets tomorrow. Thanks.